So in this video we're going to show you an HVL 90. We're going to a few things about it, and then we're going to service it, and I'm going to show you a couple little tips that I do on equipment that makes life a lot easier for the guy that's going to work on it. If you're working for a company that's got, you know, multiple pieces of equipment, this always works for me. I'm going to show you a few things about it. First thing we're going to do is we're going to take Purple Power. We're going to put it on there. We're not going to leave it on there very long because it will fade to paint. It's mixed with water. It kind of loosens up the grease and the grime, and a good preventive maintenance schedule always starts with a bath. So we're going to spray it down, we're going to give it a bath, and then we're going to bring it in the shop. We're going to change oil and filters and look it over, make sure everything's good. I'm going to show you a few things about it here. The SVL 90 is a pre-def machine. I love it. I despise machines that have def fluid on them. There's one thing about the 90 that if you've got one of these, there's a bolt down here and there's two bolts right here, and that radiator will roll out on these rollers and then it lays down towards me so that you can get in here and service it easily. The problem being is that these little slots down in here get completely full of dirt and rubbish, and you need to get all this cleaned out of here, otherwise this radiator doesn't want to roll out. Same way on the other side. It's harder to get to, but once you get this undone, you get all this rubbish out of here, and get your pressure washer right down in there and clean all that out real good. Always make sure you clean the hydraulic cooler and the radiator. One thing I like to do is I always write on the door inside where nobody can see it what my oil filter is, what my fuel filter is. I also write down how many gallons of oil it holds. The size of the drain plug is 22 millimeter. The size of the pan bolts is 17 millimeters. I kind of keep track of when I serviced it last. I like to write the dates on the filters so that if you can see them and you can look at them, you can see right down there 1657 on that fuel filter there. But it's always a good practice, and it helps you along the way. When you do little things like that, it'll save you a lot of time. We're also going to clean out the AC coil. We'll get the air filter out and we'll look at it. But we're going to give it a good bath. Make sure everything is going to be okay to run it for the next 200 hours. I like to change oil at 200 hours. And give it a good looking over and make sure it doesn't really need anything. So next thing we're going to do is, you can see here I've got my blocks all laid out on the floor. So once I get it all cleaned up, I'll let it drip dry out there. Nothing worse than having water dripping on you. And I'll bring it in here and I'll run it up on these blocks. That gives me enough room I can get underneath it with a creeper and a drain pan and not have to lay on my back. Makes it a lot easier. If you got a couple of blocks to get her up on, makes it a lot easier. So we'll get going here. We'll give it a bath and we'll clean it up, and then we'll go from there. So now that we've pressure washed it all, you'll see down in here where that's all hollow down in there. Let that radiator roll out and lay back. Another thing, by washing it, it's revealed that when I changed the oil in the planetaries last was 1294 hours. They need changed every 500 no matter what. That oil really gets burnt. Them babies really spin. The other thing I like about this machine is the windshield stows up in the ceiling. It's out of your way. It's not like it's got a door on here where you can't get out. That to me is a big thing. I've had a problem one time with a guy having to crawl out the back window because he couldn't get out the front door because the machine broke down. That's never good. It's got an air ride seat. I love the air ride seat. It's very comfortable. It's got elbow room. You can see how wide this cab is. It's got a lot of elbow room in it. Right down here, you can see a 1046 hydraulic oil. That's what I run it. It's a real slick oil. It's good for piston motors and such. But we'll let her drip off here a little bit more and we'll pull her in the shop. You kind of tuck that oil filter down in there a little bit. But once you get it out, if you hit it on the floor like that one time, it'll stay standing up and it won't fall over and drain itself all over your floor and make a mess. Even a big cat oil filter, if you just hit it on the concrete one time, it'll stand up on its own until you get time to walk over there and drain it. I always like to take a rag and wipe where the oil filter base sits on there and make sure it's clean. I always take my new filter and I put the date on it. Take a little bit of oil and put on that seal, make sure that it's good and lubricated. Spin it on there. Give it about 3/4 of a turn after it comes snug. We'll get the fuel filter next. I was going to show you the water separator bowl here real quick. So you can see the junk in the bottom of it here. We need to get that off and get that cleaned out. Here's your fuel shutoff. There's your secondary fuel filter. Now if you look, you'll see where this, I pressure washed all that out, and it lets this radiator roll out and lay down so that you can get in there to work on it. So once the radiator comes out, you can get in here and check your AC belt, check your fan belt, make sure they're good and snug. I pulled the air filters out already. So the outer filter, I always change the outer filter. You can see the junk on that. The inner filter, usually they're white or they're blue, but you don't see dirt on them like this. So this one here is definitely going to get a new one. If it's clean, I don't necessarily change the secondary, but I always change the primary. So I was going to show you here too how this hose, this radiator hose, when you push the radiator back, it goes back and lays into this holder. But while that radiator is forward, it gives you a lot of room to get in there to work on it. Just really handy to get in there rather than, you know, trying to fight it. Nothing worse than trying to fight something. So when we took off the water separator bowl, here's your little fine screen, a spring. You got this little red float. So if there's water in it, that little red piece will float up and down to show you inside this glass if it's got water in it. You look inside of here and you'll see I haven't wiped it out yet, but this is some of the junk that came out of it, and most of it looks like a rust and some slime, but I don't see any black algae or anything like that. If you see black algae in here and it's just like globs of it, that's something you really do not want. If you've got that in there, you need to get you some stuff, some treatment and put in it, because you don't want that growing. It'll get in your bulk tanks. A lot of times you will see that with biofuel. You will not see that with regular red off-road diesel fuel. But if you buy biofuel, be prepared. Anyhow, I just wanted you to see how this all went. We'll get this all cleaned up and get it put back on. And I did the fuel filter here exactly the same as I did the oil filter. I turned it over. I hit it one time on the bottom. You can see that little flat spot on there. So it'll stand up on its own without making a mess on your floor. Works really well. Another thing I always like to do is I always keep a rag in my funnel so I can wipe that out before I use it, and it stays spotless, so there's never any dust or dirt that gets in there. So before you put your oil in, always make sure your funnel's clean. One little spoonful of dirt does a whole lot of damage. We're going to test the antifreeze, make sure it's good. Our splurge tank, you know, a lot of engines, you look at the splurge tank and you don't see any coolant in there. That means you need to hurry up and take the lid off and check it. Make sure that there's coolant in there. And the way I like to do it, even if you're in a hurry, if you can't get the lid off easy, squeeze that hose. And you can feel there's coolant in that hose. You can hear it. So it's just a little bit low. So we'll get this topped off. What's in the radiator is fine. We'll get the oil put back in it. One other thing I wanted to show you on these final drives was there's 3 plugs. So if you get it level, which would be like this is your fill, that's your check, and that's your drain. So to drain it, of course, you need this standing straight up, so your drain would be perfectly on the bottom. Fill it from the top, and that's your check plug. That's your oil level, where your level is supposed to be. So we've got, when we washed it, we got all our grease fittings cleaned up. We'll hurry up and we'll hit them one more time with a rag before we grease it. But we'll get the oil in here real quick, and we're just about done with it. So one of the best parts is an electric fuel pump. Anything that's got electric fuel pump, I commend whoever builds it. If it doesn't have an electric supply pump on it, there is no reason today that every diesel engine does not have an electric supply pump. There's absolutely no reason for that. So we put our top radiator hose back in the holder. We've got our oil back in it. We've checked it. We're going to let that fuel pump run for, oh, I don't know, 3 or 4 minutes here. And then we'll get in it and we'll fire it up. Get it off the blocks, clean up our mess. That should just about do it. So the last thing we want to talk about is track sag. If you see the tracks are sagging and sloppy loose, when you go to push on them and you can't feel tension on them, they probably need snugged up. But just keep an eye on them. You don't want to run them too tight. You don't want to run them too loose. There's a happy place for them to be, and you need to pay attention to that. So I hope everybody learned a little bit of something. I hope it makes your job a little easier if you're going to service one of these. And thanks for watching.